So Danny, I've been thinking recently that one of my early kind of like shelf breaking moments, this is a term that I have literally just stolen from
The
ex-Mormon.
Mormons.
Yeah. I had one of my shelf breaking moments when I first began my deconstruction was women in leadership in the church. You know me, you know that I like to lead. I like to be in charge of stuff. And growing up as a young woman with that kind of like propensity towards leadership, constantly being told like that's not my role in the church, and kind of being given this backseat or like supportive role, never really sat right with me. So this has been top of mind for me recently because the SBC, the Southern Baptist Convention, which is, I believe, the largest, it's one of the largest denominations like of Christian churches here in the States.
I could be wrong, but I think it's the biggest. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the largest.
I think so too. And they have a lot of, so because they are the biggest, they have a lot of cultural influence. And surprisingly, sometimes not just cultural influence, but also political and religious influence as well. So they just released a statement basically saying, in more official terms, that women are to be supportive. Like they are not supposed to. So basically their statement was to ban churches that have let women pastors or let women preach on Sunday mornings. So now they are not, I guess the decision was that those churches are no longer a part of the Southern Baptist Convention. Is that also am I correct in my understanding of that?
Yeah, yes. So that's my understanding of it as well. It's also been like the bubbling up of the last like half of a decade or more. You said this kind of like I'm pretty sure it's the biggest, but it certainly has some of the most influential, like the Saddlebacks of the world. And I think like Elevation Church is SBC Church. And so like has very large.
The Village, I think too.
The Village, yeah, some really large churches. But yeah, I think that they wanted to stop short of telling women they had to wear hats in church again. But they were like, certainly every church that's had a woman speak or called them a pastor and not just teaching to women needs to be ousted. And so, yeah, that was my understanding, is that they took a firm line saying this is who we're going to be moving forward. And I do think, I'm not exactly sure because I didn't look at all the implications of it, but I think that there was retroactive kind of punishment, for lack of a better term, or for just like churches, because they took the stance of like, we're going to say women can't be pastors. So then anyone that disagrees with that, just by virtue of that, would have to pull out of the Southern Baptist. So I don't know that they're necessarily kicking them out, but they're saying like, you can't be Southern Baptist if you think women can preach and teach and pastor.
Something that I've always thought is really interesting negative, like interesting mental gymnastics, is that almost every church that I have gone to, save two, I believe, have like their official stance has been like women cannot be teaching pastors or like executive pastors or whatever. Like they have some kind of like verbiage. Threshold. Yeah, some kind of threshold of like, basically this is as high up in leadership as women can be. And sometimes that's because of the denominational rules or whatever. But in almost all of those churches, women still taught and led, but it would be in this weird kind of like unofficial capacity. So, or it would be in children's ministry. Women could lead openly in children's ministry and women's ministry,
right?
But not to men, not to the general congregation. And so anytime I would go to a conference or even just like sometimes a regular Sunday morning and there would be a woman speaking, she was never preaching, she was speaking. There was this weird semantic difference. And so I just wonder, like, what are your thoughts on that? And why do you think that exists? Like, is there actually a difference between like preaching, teaching, and like talking or speaking?
Yeah. The semantic argument is silly to me. but I would say, like, from a really tactical standpoint, there are preachers and there are teachers. And so like good example of this would be like JT is probably more of a teacher where I'm more of a preacher. But that's like not a qualification thing. I would say that's like a stylistic thing if I'm using the language of that. But the like SBC churches would use it in terms of like a qualification and a what you can do. And I can't remember if I've ever shared this on the podcast before. Maybe I have, so sorry if it's old news, but I think I've mentioned maybe that my college was a conservative Christian college. I really enjoyed it, and the institution wasn't hyper conservative, but a lot of the students were like homeschool kind of conservative Christian kids, or just conservative Christian kids in general. And our campus pastor during my years there, like the university pastor, was a woman. And the mental gymnastics, as you put it, like that people would go around this, like the university had no problem with her, but the students would be like, well, she's not really a pastor. This is like a parachurch or an extra like church thing. So she's not teaching or preaching. She's just speaking to us and like encouraging us. And that's like another line too. Like, well, I can be encouraged by a woman as a man. I just can't be taught by a woman. So yeah, for me, I mean, I think it's like super silly. It doesn't make any real sense to me, especially from a biblical case. I think there's plenty of reasons that kind of work to undermine a theology that says women can't lead, teach, or have kind of the theological term would be like be egalitarian or have equality with men. So that's where I would go. But did I miss this? You said you had a shelf breaking moment? Was it the SBC vote, or was there something else like around that was your shelf breaking moment?
No, I talked about kind of my whole deconstruction story a couple months back on the pod, but like it was one of the things that I really dug into when I started to deconstruct. So there was kind of like an official impetus where like basically my mental health got so bad because of Calvinism that I had to, because of some other life circumstances, but mostly Calvinism, that I had to deconstruct kind of for my own well-being. And but one of the things that I really, during my deconstruction, I was like, okay, well, I don't really want to stop fully being a Christian. Like, I'm not totally done with this, but here are kind of my ground rules going forward. I was like, I need to, if I'm going to attend a church again, it has to be one that allows women in leadership. It has to be one that allows marriage equality and, queer people, gay people in leadership. There were several kind of like ground rules that I had for myself. And so women in the church was something that I was really interested in other people's and other denominations' opinions on. And being raised in the subculture that I was, it actually was kind of surprising to me that there was such a diversity of thought. And then there actually are denominations that encourage women to lead and to teach and to preach and pastor. So
yeah, I am remembering now. We did an episode, I think that we titled like Maggie Explains Being a Woman to Danny or something like that, where we talked a little about this. I would be interested, because was there ever a point where it was either you at the most agreed or at the very least just felt disinterested and challenging? Like, where you remember sitting in church and kind of subscribing to the women can't be pastors as a woman, or were you always like, this doesn't check out to me, like even as a child?
Oh, it was so hard. I think the most like accepting I became of it was when I wanted to become a member of a Reformed Presbyterian church that was a part of what is it? There's two Presbyterian denominations
There's the PCA,
the US.
Which is the Presbyterian Church America, which is the more conservative, in the PCUSA. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. I think it must have been PCA because it was a fairly theologically conservative church. And what finally made me be like, okay, fine, was, and I was in my early 20s when this happened. So I had a whole life of people telling me like, this is just the way it is. And like, sorry, it doesn't make sense to you, but you have to just like like God said it. So
What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, what are you going to do about it? And the pastor of that church is someone that I still really, really respect and think the world of, and who is a kind and gracious man. And so it was one of those things where even now, thinking like I disagree with his theology at the time, and with the stance of the PCA, but in that moment when I was going through like the membership process, I was like, okay, you know what, fine. Like, if I have to like toe this party line because this is what the denomination says, then like fine, whatever. I guess I'm just wrong. And like it was almost like resignation kind of. And that was the last church I attended before I like fully deconstructed. Just because I think for a lot of reasons I was kind of getting, I only had so many more of those in the tank of just being like, okay, fine, I guess this is just the way it is.
Well, that made me, this isn't exactly where we talked about going today, but this is what kind of popped in my mind as you were talking about this. Like, I'm entrenched in Methodism, but I was a part of a church called the Evangelical Covenant Church, which operates very similar to that from a business meeting standard. The Baptist church does as well. Have you ever been to any of those things, like denominational, like business meetings?
No, I haven't. I've never like officially led in a church in that type of capacity where like I've been an intern, I've been like a lay leader, I've been that, that kind of thing, but I've never been like, I've never really had the opportunity to go to like a denominational meeting of that kind.
So for like the Presbyterians and for the Baptists and for the Methodists, they operate somewhat similarly. I think they all use Robert's Rules of Order, if you know anything about that. So it's like you have to like vote. Someone has to like make a motion, and then someone has to second this motion, and then you have to get like a 2/3 vote to like pass this motion. So someone would have had to like bring to the floor of the SBC the idea that they are going to like someone wrote legislation denominationally to like remove this, then someone seconded it, then it got voted. So I just was wondering, what do you think about like legislating theology from that perspective? Like, do you look at it and you're like, that's really interesting to me that people are doing the work together? Because you could remove the theological implications and make a case that this is like, oh, really cool that people are doing this. Or flip side, you could say, oh, this is really weird that we're like using like American political practices and like Robert's Rules of Order, and we're like going through legislating and voting and kind of lobbying to get our sides across. So does that, like, as someone that's not been a part of it, but it kind of saw the outpouring of the SBC vote, and again, I'm like just a month or so out of my annual conference where we did all the same sort of stuff, different theological conversations, but still the same general practices. Like, as an outsider to that process, is that like encouraging, discouraging, or indifferent to you?
I don't know if it's fair to say that I'm of two minds on this. I think that I can just see the benefits of both, kind of.
Yeah.
Because you're presenting kind of like, so what would be the alternative? And to this kind of like really structured, formalized voting system would be like this less structured, kind of more nebulous diversity of thought and opinion. And I can kind of see the pros and cons of both of those things. The pros of the kind of really standardized, regimented is like predictability, order, people know what to expect. And it is a way to, kind of run a church like a democracy. Like, you keep bringing up the American political system, which like America's not a democracy, it's a democratic republic, but like whatever, it's same, type of deal. And so there is a lot of, especially when you're dealing with large groups of people, like the SBC has millions of people in it. It governs millions of congregants. When you're dealing with numbers that big, I definitely see the benefit to having this regimented system if your end goal is homogeny and like kind of a singular party line, or like what's the word I'm looking for? I guess like homogeny.
Yeah.
If that's your goal, then yeah, you have to have something that's regimented and structured like this. Otherwise, it's going to be too nebulous. It'll be too crazy. My non-generous take is that if your end goal is control, this is how you have to do it. That's my like kind of cynical take. I don't think that some pastors or people that are high up in the SBC are like, we got to control the lay people. Like we got to, control this flock. Like, I don't think that's most people's like active thought, but that is certainly like a con of this. The pro to kind of letting churches do more what they want to do and like have like a church by church basis is that you do get more of that diversity, but some might argue that you become less united theologically because there is so much difference.
Yeah.
So, and some would also say that the body is more difficult to control because of its heterogeny. The difference is there. So I think I'm kind of with you. I'm a person that like in my daily life, I do like order and structure. I love a plan. I love an itinerary. But I also like am a grown up and I understand that's like not how the world that's like not how the world works all the time. And sometimes you make a really beautiful color coded spreadsheet for your family for the holiday, and then nobody looks at it and everybody just does what they want anyway. And that's just the way it goes sometimes. So
that is the way it goes sometimes. We're about to go to Disneyland here tomorrow as a family. Actually, as this releases, we will currently be walking around Disneyland.
So fun.
And we have an itinerary, and I said the same thing to my wife. I was like, we maybe should like plan ideas we want to do, like big areas, but we're going to be discouraged if our metric of success is we have to ride this ride 5 times or 10 times or whatever.
Yeah.
You also just like very eloquently described, whether realized you were doing this or not, the tension and dichotomy between non-denominational churches and like mainline churches. The homogeny and kind of, I used to say that being non-denominational was like the Wild West. It's like you had all the freedom. You had the umbrella of Christianity, but the freedom to do what you wanted. Where mainline churches are much more like the bureaucracy of American politics. And I appreciate you saying like, I don't think there's anyone malicious at the top or whatever, because I really don't. But I also think that like
I don't think consciously. I don't think they're literally sitting up there like twisting their mustache, being like, hee, how can we be evil today? Like, I don't think that's. I do think that the result of some of those actions really makes it seem like that's what's happening. But
what's the phrase that ultimate power corrupts ultimately, or whatever? Is that the phrase? Like, I do think that when people get to those seats, they have to like sacrifice a lot. They bought into like the things that they fought for. I'll use the Evangelical Covenant as an example. Like I'll throw them under the bus as a former denomination of mine, though I really do love them and a lot of people there. But like they take a firm stance on queer exclusion because a lot of the people that finally got into power were fighting for so long on that to like keep it as a place that was like theologically vague but still conservative. And as they watched it become less vague and maybe more progressive, they're like, all right, we got to draw a hard line. And it's like, so things like that can happen a little bit. Well, that's interesting. I don't know what made me think about this, but I want to bring up, I have to do it again, politics for a second.
Danny, I'm not going to talk about politics, Liebarger.
Did you see this is it just popped in my mind, maybe not, but there's like just a ton of talk going around about democratic socialism right now. Did you see the graphic from the Will Cain show that's been like circulating? Do you know who Will Cain is?
I don't.
He's done like sports stuff. That's how like I feel like I got introduced to him, but he's like a Tucker Carlson like knockoff. I mean, he's like I think fairly popular, seems like a
Yeah.
seemingly nice guy. But anyway, so like he was like just dogging on democratic socialism. And so there's this graphic behind him. And he's talking about all of the terrible things about it. And I just wanted to read them to you.
Yeah.
And he's like talking about how these are going to like degrade America. It was
Okay.
Medicare for all, college for everybody, housing for everyone, a 32-hour work week, taxing the rich, the Green New Deal, and freeing Palestine. And this has just been like rotating around. People are like, I think all of these are like pretty agreeable things that everyone wants. And short of maybe the Israel Palestine being the most politically charged of that, I was like, I can't think of any person that would have any beef on like Medicare, college, and housing being free, working 32 hours and calling it full time, taxing the rich. And so it just made me laugh. I like saw it. I was like, they ripped it apart pretty hard because they're like, you're like selling democratic socialism to Americans right now.
What you're doing is like making it sound awesome. Like by it's that does come off as them being like, oh my God, if this person gets elected, like everybody gets a cookie. Won't that be terrible? Like that's what in my mind, that's kind of what it sounds like.
Yeah.
But, and I can say as someone who really grew up in a very ultra conservative political space as well, that does sound scary when your brain is absolutely rotted out by like the Protestant work ethic. And like, because all of that sounds like people who are lazy getting stuff for free. When in actuality, it's not that. And so that's why probably a lot of people, like if that's your worldview of like, we all have like life sucks and then you die, we all have to work hard and it's a fight till the end. Then like, giving people things for quote unquote free sounds Maggie, like,
This is why you're such a good co-host, because you brought it back. Isn't this the same tension of women in ministry in the SBC?
Wow.
It feels like a compromise, because I do like, if we get the theological implication, I do think that's part of it, right? Like I think for the women, like the trad wives of the world that buy into this, and like the kind of misogynistic men that buy into this, I do think that it's like it's the sunken cost fallacy. It's also like there's no shortcuts to heaven, and the shortcut is like men have to labor over their lives and toil and have dominion over their wives and their world and their jobs, and that women have to learn to be like submissive and don't embrace that Jezebel spirit. And this idea, or like that gay people aren't going to hell, is like, well, you're just giving too much grace away, right? Like it becomes too, I can't remember now the theologian, he's very popular, but it comes into this like cheap grace idea that it's like it's too, the cost is too low for it still to be good. They're like, you're diluting the product. And so, and I see that in some of those things on the graphic. You're like, to a non-Christian, if you're like, well, my faith it embraces all genders and sexualities, thinks that it believes in egalitarian leadership, that everyone can lead. It believes in pushing back racial injustice. And like, you can name all these things. A non-Christian would be like, yeah, that's dope. I would actually sign up for that thing. And then I don't want to throw reform people, but a conservative evangelical fundamentalist would be like, well, that's just like compromising or throwing out all the good things, or the baby with the bathwater, X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
And this is why I like naturally sometimes gravitate to politics, because I just see in the Venn diagram of life, they operate in the same schema of thought, kind of.
No, they totally do. And it is, in my experience, was my religious framework impacted how I saw everything else, because that's what you're explicitly instructed to do. Like when you're in these fundamentalist evangelical spaces, you are handed this extremely conservative framework and told out loud, this should permeate every other piece of your life. Like this should be how you live your life politically, socially, financially, everything. Like, so they are inextricably linked for sure. You can't really separate them entirely, especially not in America, where we, the church really has its fingers in American politics too.
Yeah. What would you like? So like if you came up to, I mean, you're now a woke liberal feminist.
Woke mind virus. Yep.
Yeah, you're a
Jezebel spirit has taken over.
Yeah, a Jezebel spirit ready to drive the stake through the guy's head.
Jail
Right?
apologist. Yeah.
What would you say? So, like, say your friend came up to you. This was more common for me in Portland. I had like truly irreligious friends, but I suspect there's still like atheist, agnostic, and kind of religiously ignorant people here, even though St. Louis, our context is like just very Catholic. So it feels like everyone kind of has some, but I suspect there's people that are. So, say one of your friends came up to you and was like, hey, I got invited to my friend's wedding. And this pastor came up and he spoke for 40 minutes, which is already weird at a wedding. And like 35 minutes of it was about the wife submitting to the husband. And I know you're a church adjacent, Maggie, you're a Christian. What would you say back to that person with those kind of questions? Trying to like comfort or soothe or whatever them.
Yeah, I've been to those weddings for sure. And I also have heard people multiple times say like planning your wedding is like a chance to share the gospel with your like non-believing friends and family members, which I don't really think is necessarily what a wedding is for.
Yeah.
But I would explain that like that is the goal in mind going in. It's not just to get two people married. It's to share the gospel, which the way that they do that is by really honing in on the sanctity of marriage being between one man and one woman and the complementarian roles of that union. So it like growing up in that environment, that type of wedding service makes a ton of sense to me. But now being like kind of on the outside of it and having different views, I can kind of see it for what it is, which like you go to a wedding like that and you're like, this is a cult. Like it feels very, very culty. Yeah, especially like there, oh gosh, just kicked my own table. There's a lot of like emphasis as well on the woman's role of submission and less on the man's role of leadership. Well, they say like, oh, well, a man is supposed to lead, but like never really get into like what that actually entails. And then also if he's a shitty leader, like nothing bad happens to him. Like that's the deal is like.
I have always been struck by that. I'm like, I go to these and I preach pretty, like my sermons, my services for weddings are like 15 minutes start to finish, 20 minutes, like they're pretty quick.
Yeah.
Usually these like conservative evangelical weddings, like the sermon is 40 minutes on its own. I've
been to some short ones, but it'll be, if it is shorter, the content is still usually the same, just like condensed.
Yeah, but I noticed like the lion's share of it is towards the woman. It's like there's no real thought on like leadership of like what does it mean to do mutual submission or what does it mean to lead well, even if you're going to take like a really conservative. But it's like they spend a lot of time talking about what the follower does or the submissive does. And I do think to your point, like if you were just like, if you took away all the blinders and the trappings of religiosity that you knew, you'd be like, this is the final step of cult indoctrination. It's like they're just like having this person stand up in front of 200 of their closest friends and family and hear how they're still not ever going to be as good as their husband. Like that's the final boss that they're fighting. And most of them just, and this is not, I'm not throwing shade at these women, but like a lot of them like just give up to it or resign to it. Like, I guess this is what it is. And I know like a lot of really smart, generous, kind, and capable women that have like surrendered that. And I also know a lot of really smart, kind, generous men who have bought into leading in this way because they think that it's what they have to do. So I don't think all men are like jerks in this either. But I just think that it does feel, and I've never really conceptualized it as this, but as you were describing it, like it felt like every like bad horror movie's final cult ceremony where it's like we're just we're giving so much pressure and pomp and circumstance, it feels like sealing of the theology in that moment.
Yes. And then like the camera zooms in on the woman's face and you like see the change in her eyes, like she's given in to the, you know, she's like bought into the cult mentality, and like
you see one tear just
yes.
Did you watch Plubris? Did you ever see that show?
No.
Oh, it's like it's about this like so it's about this mind virus that like takes over, and they say that they want the best for everyone, and like they do. They genuinely, they're like, we will make you thrive. We want the best for you, but all you have to do is give up yourself. Like you don't get to exist anymore. We exist for you. Essentially die, but you become a part of this global mind hive that is trying to connect everyone. And they genuinely want the best for you, but the best only comes by completely dying. And like, so your existence ends, but your body lives on. And so it's a really interesting like examination of like, is it really good for you if you had to like get rid of yourself to get it, and you have no recollection? And watching Plubris made me think about what it feels like to be an evangelical. It's like you're dying completely, which is like Christian language. You're dying completely to yourself, and then the mind virus gets to control you, or the hive gets to control you.
Yes. And this is, I've said before on this podcast that a lot of like Christian language that we use to describe our relationship with God is abusive. Like if a person was saying like, die to yourself, submit only to me, that's abuse, girl. Like get out, you know? But yeah, especially from, and this is when my like absolute raging feminist comes out, because yeah, so many of these wedding ceremonies are like internalized misogyny final boss. Like you are standing up there on what is allegedly the most important day of your life and promising to submit to this man who frankly is just some guy, like literally a guy you met in college who, yeah, I'm sure is great, but like, girl, you're going to hand over your autonomy. You're going to hand over your body if you want to have children. You're handing over your emotional and mental capacity for the rest of this marriage to this man. And what has he done to deserve that other than be born with a penis? Like that's truly.
Yeah. He bought you one Bud Light and played a little cornhole with you. And then you're like, oh my gosh, this guy is my one.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that like, you know, women don't love their husbands, because like, I also love my husband very much. But at the end of the day, like he is not inherently in charge of me just because of the way that he was born.
Yeah.
That's not how our marriage works. That's not how our household runs, and it never has been. And I'm thankful for that. But the SBC would certainly say that our marriage is not a biblical one, whatever that means.
Yeah, and that's always like something I like walk the track down of like, so whether it's gay marriage or like a egalitarian household, or even like a household where like the woman is leading, whatever, and the man is like, Mark Driscoll would lose his mind, but like I remember like, he like was stitching videos of like stay-at-home dads and stuff. He's like, why are these? But I'm always like, all right, say you buy into this like really heteronormative kind of patriarchal thing. What is this huge negative you're seeing on the other side? Like, that's the thing that I've never really been able to like piece together, is what is the sin that you're watching on the other side of this?
It makes me think back to that guy that you were talking about of like, this is what the democratic socialists want. And it's like, yeah, those are all good things. Like, I don't know. And so, yeah, if you think about like a family where the wife is the breadwinner and the dad stays at home with the kids, is the family in shambles? Like, are the kids like, you know, distraught and emotionally stunted because their dad is their primary caregiver? Like, no, not usually. And if they are, the answer isn't the mom quitting her job and becoming a stay-at-home mom. The answer is like, there's something else going on in that, you know, family relationship. It's not because the wrong gender is taking care of the kids. Or like, same argument with like same-sex couples having kids. It's like, oh, if it was really as bad as conservative evangelicals seem to think that it's going to be, every person raised by a same-sex couple would be like a serial killer who's just like depraved and non, like violent and non-functioning in society. But that's not the case.
That tends to not be the case, actually. Surprisingly not. I have so many thoughts on that. It's just like such an interesting. It does it still doesn't make sense to me. This is like a weird pastoral thing to say, but I do think that like we over theologize all of this and to like create this magical force field around it that is impenetrable because it can't be like logically defeated. You can't really have a logical argument with Mark Driscoll's theology because he's always going to bring it back to like, well, I'm the only one with the right version of it, and you've just like watered it down or compromised. And it's like the ultimate tactic and the most frustrating one of kind of fundamentalism or conservative evangelicalism.
Something that I have grown very weary of, even now being like kind of back in the church and active as a practicing Christian again, is that over spiritualization of everything, of like, certainly every conflict, but even every like good thing, even every like nice thing that happens is this spiritual experience when sometimes it's just life. Like it doesn't always have to come back to, well, this is the way that God designed. Anytime I get into like an argument with my husband, I'm not like, wow, well, this is because God designed him with a masculine warring spirit and I have to submit to it. Like, no, it's just like we're two people living together and sometimes we argue like that,
But John Eldridge wrote Wild at Heart, and you have to read it.
Stacey Eldridge's book, And the Bride Wore White, traumatized me. I'm not joking. There are like lines from that book that are seared into my brain for all time. I read it at a very formative age and it was awful. It's awful.
Yeah. Like I remember growing up in church, like or in the era of church where like there were like, take the Bible out. There were really 3 books that you had to read, 4 books you had to read as a Christian. One was Left Behind. Like it had to give you your theology. And it like now you look at the ripple effects, people have terrible eschatology or
rapture anxiety.
Yeah, things. And I had rapture anxiety. You had to read Wild at Heart, which told men that they were like these all adventurers. And so anyone that didn't want to like hike was like, well, I guess I'm not a man. I think what was the woman book? Captivated was like the companion book or Captivating.
Yeah, Captivating. Oh, I also read that. Oh my God. I read Captivating and The Bride Wore White.
Yeah.
And the grossest thing to come out of those is like women need to be loved and men need to be respected. That's so disgusting. First of all, everybody needs to be respected and everybody needs to be loved.
Yeah.
If you don't have either one of those things, your relationship is bad. Like that's not good.
It is. I don't want to pick on like my parents and my parents' parents, but it is like the outpouring of like this generation of like out of the 50s and then the 60s. It's like people were just like during like the world wars, you didn't have a lot of time to think about your emotions, and men went and fought and women held things down. And then you come back and you're building these families. And it feels like they had the first time to like reflect on this, but they stayed in these gender roles. Mm-hmm. And then out of it, both secularly and religiously, it's like that's where you get like men are from Mars, women are from Venus. You get the you've probably heard the just really, I think, stupid way. I mean, it maybe works for some people, but like the men are waffles and women are spaghetti in the way our minds work, right? And then, and then you get Wild at Heart, and you get like all that. And like I get it, like I compartmentalize things, but my mind's spaghetti all the time, right? And so I like to be charitable to the generations. I think they fell into a trope, and then they tried to like create language that was theological around it. And now we're decades removed from that, and we're like, it just is dumb. Like, and not to be super, super mean, but it's super reductive. It's not very smart in like almost every metric. And it just, the theology of it's really bad from the Christian's perspective.
Yeah. it doesn't hold up if you think about it for even 1 minute. Like,
Yeah.
and I think that it has this longevity because it's really, really convenient and it fits, it like slots into a patriarchy very, very well. Of like, oh,
Yeah.
well, men are so direct, they're simple, they are unfettered by all of this emotional baggage. They just deal with things and move on. Like their brains are waffles, they compartmentalize, and they're
Yeah.
visual creatures, they're sexual and virile, and like they love to hike and all this stuff. And then women are these like wishy-washy, complicated, um, weepy emotional baggage that men have to carry with them and lead through the world because they're so, if left to their own devices, women would be so bogged down by all of their emotions that they can't even function. Like that work like fits into a patriarchal society very, very well.
Yeah.
And so even though it's not true, I think it's had this staying power because of the way that our culture is and the way that our society is built. And thinking about it just like scientifically, yeah, there are differences between men and women. There are tendencies. But that's the thing, they're tendencies, or they're like propensities towards. It doesn't mean that every single man is going to be this like I remember Stacey Eldridge was really huge into the Braveheart
Yeah.
She referenced that a lot. Not every man is going to be this warrior riding a horse and giving a rousing speech to their men, and not every woman is a weeping emotional disaster. Like it's there are differences maybe between the two genders, but they're tendencies. It's not a rule. It's not a law of nature.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. It's I have so many, I don't know, paid or unpaid actors going on behind me in this podcasting right now. I'm like handwriting notes to my children.
Do you like?
I'm trying to like stay. I got Grace behind me with her New Balances and a tank top in her hand. What do you need, my friend? Oh, you should do that. Heck yeah. She's going to go play with the neighbor friends.
Heck yeah. Love that.
Well, Maggie, maybe this is where we land the plane because I have kids going outside and you probably have clients to see. But what do we do with all this? Like I ask myself this a lot, like and I think this relates to deconstruction just in the most general term of what do we do after we've torn it all down, or what do we do when, like, I look at this and there's just this giant wall of, as I said with Driscoll's theology, like impenetrable patriarchy, more or less. What do we do with that? Do we just like say like, well, I guess this has to live here and let's like go create a new sandbox? Like the SBC's voted like we're just doubling down, and we just like, all right, take your sandbox, we'll go create our own. Or is the work to tear it down? Like is the deconstruction from your perspective, and obviously not speaking for everyone, but meant to be like systemic, or is it personal and we hope that it, like, what do you think?
Well, I don't know if it's really fair for me to prescribe things to other people, but what I can say is what I have done is just become like super not fun at parties. Like if people, I have absolutely no patience for casual misogyny. So like if I'm with a group of people and there's people making jokes about women or whatever that are like, yeah, I could just let that one go. No, like it's like, I don't think that's funny. I don't think it's funny to talk about women that way. And like, yeah, it does kind of make you unlikable, but hey, sometimes that's the way it has to be.
Yeah.
I think from a systemic standpoint, we can't succumb to the idea that just because something has always been one way, that's the way it will always be.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that it's fair to the people still. I don't think it's fair to the women who are being subjugated by the SBC to say like, well, that's a sandbox. We're going to build our own and play over here without you guys, because there are women that are truly being victimized by this theology, and men. It's not fair to men either. It is reductive, but we have to hold out hope and work towards reform in my opinion. So
yeah. I think I agree. I have 10 out of 10, no notes. I agree with that.
Amazing.
All right. Well, Maggie, this was fun. You're going to be joined by our buddy JT next week.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
We are gonna hopefully record some episodes this week.
All right.
Who knows what we're gonna chat about, but I'm sure it'll be fun.
Well, I'll listen while I'm on vacation. But everyone else, keep tuning in. Thanks for joining us on the Deconstruction Zone. And Maggie, I won't see you next week, but I'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Yes. Have fun on vacation. We'll see you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.